Hello and welcome back to No Bullshit. Today we return to talking about left-leaning digital media companies going out of business, or at least dramatically slowing down and shrinking their operations. Previously we talked about BuzzFeed, who had closed a number of its offices because they just aren't making enough money anymore. They had international news offices in the UK and Australia that recently had to be put on pause, possibly indefinitely, and that's because BuzzFeed is failing. And that's also happening with another company who was actually mentioned and featured in that previous BuzzFeed video I talked about. We're of course now talking about Vice Media. Vice is another very left-wing, very hipster and kind of liberal supporting media outlet, and they're facing troubles as well now too. And I think it's a very, very interesting coincidence because we just talked about BuzzFeed going down, now we have Vice going down, and both of these guys are liberal outlets that started around the same time. They started around the mid 2000s, and now they're facing some controversy and some downturn. You know, they had a good run, they were doing extremely well the last 10 or so years, but the last few ads have been going down. Things have been on a turn, and I think a lot of it has to do with the culture shift too, because people are sick of these lying outlets. They're sick of them telling them liberal propaganda. They're SJWBS. They're always supporting anti-traditional liberal stuff, hating on conservatives, bashing Trump, and it's just frankly getting very old. Now, admittedly, Vice is very different than BuzzFeed in a lot of ways. BuzzFeed is just this kind of popcorn, silly stuff. They put videos on YouTube. They don't put a lot of thought or effort into it. It's just quick view, cash grab stuff. Vice, on the other hand, they do make a little more production value for it. They go out, they report, they do these sort of documentary style things. They have a show on HBO. There's definitely a different style going on here, and I'll give them credit for that. There's definitely a positive thing to kind of visiting places, reporting, gathering information, going to the scene of the situation that they're talking about. They go to other countries. They actually put effort in and film stuff, but there is a big downside to Vice too. They used to be a lot cooler. They used to be a serious site that like anyone could watch, even a conservative. They talk about just interesting stories and issues, and dramatically over time they've gotten more left-leaning and more anti-Trump. They have videos against that. They've covered events like conservative rallies and been very biased about how they turned out and how they covered them. They've had SJW leans too. They've had videos on YouTube. They do have a channel here. It's just, I think, not their bread and butter like how it is with BuzzFeed. And we've also covered a number of Vice videos here too. They've done the race baiting stuff. They've done the stuff that's pro-alphabet. One of my top videos of all time is actually covering a Vice documentary about them going to Sweden and having this non-binary couple raising their kids as like gender neutral. But the problem with that story was, and this is the problem with all their stories, they're all very biased, pro-liberal, anti-traditional propaganda. But with the gender neutral stuff, it actually just ends up being a thing where they just want people to be less male. They say it's gender neutral and they try to act like it's neither side, but really it's like they're raising these boys to be girls. And at the end of the day, it's like an anti-male thing. And a lot of people can see through their BS, like acting like it's progressive and cool and hip. But in actuality, it's just anti-male, anti-tradition and all that kind of stuff. So with all that said, with that introduction out of the way, let's turn to this article. It has more details. It's called Vice Media Lays Off 155 Employees, Deepest Cuts in Digital Group. This is from Variety. You can see a picture there. Reminds me of a few things, just how Vice always has a show. They have this logo that's kind of old school. They're kind of like for the older crowd, as we mentioned before in the previous video, how they're a little bit above. BuzzFeed is for kids and teens. Vice is more for like people in college age, in your 20s, even 30s. Like it's a more hipster kind of thing too, and that's just kind of where they're at. And with all that said, let's read into the article. Vice Media Group, which includes Refinery 29, is laying off 155 employees, or more than 5% of its total worldwide headcount, in response to revenue declines stemming from the pandemic. About 2/3 of the staff cuts, around 100, will be international, with 55 layoffs affecting U.S. employees. Vice Media Group CEO Nancy Dubuque wrote in an internal memo Friday obtained by Variety that international layoffs will happen over the next few weeks, while the Brooklyn-based company's U.S. staffers will be let go Friday. Okay, this is interesting because we saw the same kind of thing happening with BuzzFeed. I mentioned that in the intro, and BuzzFeed took down their international stuff and kept most of their local American people and hires and offices, and that seems to be pretty much what Vice is doing. Sure, there's still 55 of their people coming off in America, but most of it's coming from outside of America, and I think this is also just showing they've got a lot of people there too. Like, it seems like we're getting specific numbers. The numbers were far lower at BuzzFeed. Perhaps they have more people locally, but this is a different situation with the numbers. But it is similar how they're taking down the international stuff, and it's due to this sort of pandemic that's kind of cutting into everyone's pockets. In the memo titled "The Course Ahead," Dubuk wrote, "While losing even one job feels like too many, these decisions ultimately rest with me, and I assure you that we went to great lengths to preserve jobs. Vice's digital teams will be disproportionately affected by the layoffs. Currently, the company's digital organization accounts for 50% of headcount costs, but only brings in about 21% of our revenue," Dubuk said in the memo. "Looking at our business holistically, this imbalance needed to be addressed for the long-term health of our company." Yeah, I would say they definitely have the problem of overexpanding again. They went too big too quick. Companies need to do that, surely. They want to keep growing. But at the same time, they could have just been happy with what they had a bit. I mean, they had a good news organization. They had a website. They had a show on HBO, which now I think just actually had to transfer to Showtime. Got canceled and brought back up by Showtime. But still, they have all this stuff going on. They didn't need the international stuff. I think they kind of just went too far, too quick, and they didn't plan for sorts of kind of problems like this whole pandemic, but no one really planned for it. But at the same time, it's hitting people that overexpanded for sure. A former Vice Media employee told Variety that the company already has been making layoffs over the last several weeks. According to Dubik, Vice Media was able to retain about 90% of the jobs in the digital organization by eliminating open roles across the company. In addition, the company is moving as many individuals as possible over the growing Vice News division. After many years of economic headwinds in digital advertising, Dubik wrote, "The situation has become even worse. The squeeze is becoming a chokehold. Platforms are not just taking a larger slice of the pie, but almost the whole pie." In statement, Vice Union, which represents editorial and other employees, claimed that for more than a month, company management repeatedly refused to discuss work-share programs like the one the Los Angeles Times used to avoid layoffs. "We understand that the entire news industry is hurting," Vice Union's statement said. "We do not understand why Vice chose to lay off many of our colleagues in the middle of a global pandemic instead of exhausting all options to save these jobs." Okay. So, a lot of information there, mostly having to do with them not making as much money as they used to. The websites and platforms are taking bigger shares. We've seen that here on this website and many others too. So, that's understandable. And then next, we're talking about the Vice Union, and this is a funny situation because it's kind of like the liberals getting what they asked for. Unions can be very helpful for workers, but they also complicate things and can be sources of corruption too. It's a very liberal kind of mobster move. We're not in the past where liberals were kind of a racket as much anymore, but it still happens some places. It still happens in very old jobs, very old cities like Chicago, New York City. This is where a lot of crime and shady deals comes from. And in terms of the Vice Union, I think it's just an annoyance for the company, and it's something they have to deal with though, because this is what liberals ask for. They're liberals. They're always talking about being of the workers, of the people. They're pro-union all the time. That's like part of their old platform. And it might seem a little dated now, but it's still something they have to deal with, and it's them getting what they kind of deserved and asked for. It sucks, and I'm glad someone's standing up for the employees, but it's like, dude, you work for Vice. I'm sorry. I don't want anyone to lose their job, but Vice is just the worst, man. I mean, they're really spreading some bad information. The layoffs come after Vice Media implemented belt-tightening moves at the end of March, extending for a 90-day period. Those steps, which are currently effective through June 30th, include a sliding scale of pay cuts for employees earning $100,000 or more, a temporary suspension on promotions, and a halt on company-matched 401k contributions. Vice Media staff who are being pink-slipped will receive severance pay. In addition, everyone will be able to keep their work-issued laptops as well as receive outplacement services, Dubuk said in the memo. In the U.S., laid-off employees will receive extended health benefits coverage through the end of 2020. Okay, not sounding too bad because they're cutting people that make over $100,000. I mean, that's a lot of money. I know they might be living in New York City or something like that, so the cost of living is higher, but that's just part of the process. I feel bad. I don't want anyone to lose their jobs, but here's a comment from Jimmy. It says, good, they're nothing but left-wing propaganda. Give them a taste of their own socialist medicine. That's kind of what I was saying before about the pro-union stuff and the lockdown stuff too. I think it's just part of the process. It's part of the problem there at Vice. They kind of get what you ask for. They've always been this kind of power to the people kind of thing, and now it's biting them in the butt, and they're facing struggles due to this virus. Now, I don't want to officially cheer this on. You don't want to be like a total negative Nancy expressing happiness when someone else is failing, but this is Vice News, and it goes along with the BuzzFeed as well. These guys are fake news. These guys are terrible liberal-leaning outlets who spread liberal propaganda, anti-white propaganda. They're bashing Trump, America. They're not good actors, and that's why we can safely say, hey, let's see them go down. Let them take it all the way to the ground. Let's get some new websites out there, new media reporters. Let's show them, this is a proof. And I think this is the kind of thing that shows that this fake news stuff is on a downturn. People don't want to put up with liberal propaganda anymore. People are turning towards conservative. The conservative movements are getting more successful. People are grabbing onto our messages and just saying, hey, we're sick of being lied to. We're sick of the SJW politics, the wokeness, always talking about race and gender and sexuality and all that sort of identity politics stuff. It's getting old. And also the Democrats are getting old. So I think that's one kind of good thing to come out of this virus. It's a terrible situation. This health scare couldn't end any sooner, but there are some positives kind of coming out of it. Not only is it exposing these fake news mills who need to kind of shut down or at least shrink down and get to more reasonable sizes, but in addition, it's exposing Democrats. It's showing that their policies are terrible. It's showing that they're pro-lockdown and pro-authoritarian stuff that people are getting sick of. And also, they're just terrible leaders. They're not people you want to follow. These Democrats run some of the worst states in the country. They're the ones that are getting struck by this terrible outbreak the worst. And they're also just handling it the worst. They're talking about places like Michigan that have this sort of dictator government, this Governor Whitmer who won't shut down, and the Supreme Court had to go against her and all this stuff. It's bad people. And at the same time, you also got to acknowledge places like California, Michigan, New York, if they keep electing these Democrats, they're going to keep getting this stuff. And that's what they need to realize is stop voting for them. Stop giving them power. Turn the tide. Let's get some more conservatives and smart, like-minded people into office. This actually just happened in California too. One last note before we wrap up is California just turned a few seats in this sort of pop-up election, and it showed that conservatives can get elected in these blue states. We can turn them for the better, get rid of these bad governments, get rid of these bad fake news people, and bring America back to a more honest and hopeful place. That about wraps things up. Thanks for watching. Hope you guys have a great day. Make sure you comment your thoughts on everything below. What do you think about Vice shutting down? Is it a hopeful sign? Are you glad that BuzzFeed is going down too? Comment your thoughts below. Leave a like if you enjoyed this video, and thanks for watching. Everybody, have a great day.